Hello.
Hello, Scott. Shall I say good morning to you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for your flexibility. I apologize about our confusion for
Nah,
the meeting.
not a problem at all. I'm just very happy that I can speak to you. Um, I'm very interested to find out what is happening in America and how you are dealing with the lockdown situation. And of course, are involved in an orchestra as well.
Hmm.
So could you give me an idea of the lockdown, how it started for you?
Yes, it's been challenging for certainly in many ways. I have two orchestras here in the States. I have an orchestra in West Virginia and I have an orchestra in Ohio near Cincinnati. And the pandemic really affected those two orchestras in quite different ways. Um, the orchestra in Ohio is a completely professional orchestra, and like many orchestras in the country, we closed the doors for a long period of time. Um, After about, let's see, we had our last concert before the pandemic began in February of 2020. Um, and then we closed the doors completely until October, um, and did not do any performing, any rehearsing, anything whatsoever. Um, it was a challenge, even from the fundraising standpoint,
Mm.
without doing any kind of performances whatsoever. In October, we we tested the waters, if you will, a bit by doing we did an outdoor performance, uh, and even so, it was a performance where we rehearsed with strings in the morning, we rehearsed with the brasses and the winds in the afternoon, and then we really did two separate concerts uh, in an outdoor amphitheater with no audience. We recorded, and then we released that on YouTube and Facebook and in venues like that. Um, the other orchestra, the one in West Virginia, uh, it actually it's not a completely professional orchestra. It's a professional slash community orchestra. I would say there are some folks who play in it who are not paid, and that orchestra really, I'm quite proud to say that orchestra uh,
Really? Mm.
never stopped rehearsing. Now we did some, we tried to be creative. We had to, of course, socially distance the orchestra. So for our first performances, we only did strings, and that orchestra, I should add, that orchestra rehearses once per week, um,
Okay.
and the other orchestra just rehearses at concert time. But we would rehearse strings one week, we would rehearse winds the next week, so forth and so on. It was challenging because that orchestra is accustomed to being together more often.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of a challenge.
But where did you perform? If you say the
We performed that university is affiliated with a university, and
oh,
we
I
performed
see. Okay.
and we performed at the university. Um,
Mm.
and again, we recorded those performances.
Oh, I
Um,
see. Okay. Mm.
so this semester, this half of the season, we're getting ready to. We had our dress rehearsal last night with that orchestra, um, and we're getting ready to record those concerts. Now, I'm happy to say that West Virginia now has reopened completely.
Mm.
The governor has lifted all restrictions for performances. So next Tuesday evening, we'll have that concert.
Mm.
Uh, our challenge there is, of course, we still have to be socially distanced. So our facility is not large enough to handle that. So we've had to go and find a facility that's large enough to seat the orchestra on the stage. But we were able to find and we actually went to the Capitol, at the state Capitol, uh, to be performing next week.
Oh, I
So
see. But how did you manage to keep the musicians say motivated, or did you feel sort of did you have this responsibility? Because I feel for the conductors, because I think you are sort of having to lead almost this process.
I'm happy and not happy to hear you say that, to be quite
Mm.
honest with you, because you're the first person I've heard to acknowledge that. It has been incredibly challenging to be a conductor during this time, because we feel a great responsibility to our ensembles to keep them playing, keep them together. The West Virginia group, um, for many of those musicians, as I said, there are some who are not professional musicians in that group, and for many of them, um, there is a social aspect to the orchestra that's as strong as the artistic
Mm.
aspect, and is important. So to keep them playing and to keep them together and to keep them moving forward has been a responsibility I took very seriously. And I'm happy to say that orchestra never really had to stop.
Mm.
The musicians, I think, were very appreciative of that. At the same time, I will say it's challenging because I felt a bit like the orchestra was a nomad this
Oh,
season,
okay.
because we've even had to search for places to rehearse because of the space limitations. So we've rehearsed in gymnasiums, we've rehearsed all over, just to have the opportunity to get together. The orchestra in Ohio is a bit of a different animal, if you will. That particular orchestra, we got together again in February with strings, and we recorded a concert at a creative arts center in the city where the orchestra is based. And we did strings, and we had a piano soloist. We did Beethoven's third piano concerto in a string reduction, and it's on YouTube now. It just turned out beautifully.
Mm.
So that one is a little bit different. I would love to have more opportunities for that, but I'm a little cautiously optimistic. We are performing with that orchestra in July, an outdoor performance, and we're, as a matter of fact, we're meeting tonight to firm up all the details on our 2021-22 season, which will begin in October. So we're planning to have full indoor concerts beginning in October.
Amazing. That would be amazing. Yeah.
We hope.
Yeah. But you were talking about the orchestra at the university.
Hmm. I'm sorry, my dog is trying to get my attention. I'm sorry.
So, my dog is sleeping. uh,
Yes,
you're
the one
saying
at the university.
the one at the university, yeah? Is that the one in Ohio?
Mhm. No, that's the one in West Virginia.
In West, okay. So you're
Right.
working with
Ohio is the
students
professional
there?
orchestra.
Okay. So you're working with students
We,
there.
mhm. Yes, there are students in that orchestra is unique. I'm very happy with that orchestra. It's only about 5 years old. The orchestra was founded in 2015, and the mission of the orchestra is to give students, community members, all of those folks who have this great desire to make music. They have an opportunity once per week to play with professionals, because there are the principals of that orchestra are professionals and they're paid.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
So it's an opportunity to sit with professional musicians each week, and it's been delightful
Mm.
to work with that orchestra. It has come so far in a short period of time. The orchestra actually performed once in Carnegie Hall, and performed once at the Kennedy Center in Washington. So the quality of the orchestra is quite good, um, but surprisingly, it's a very short period of time. It's come that far.
Mm.
That's one of the reasons why I felt it so important that we did not stop
Yeah.
during the pandemic. I did not want to stop the momentum of the orchestra, and the motivation of the orchestra is still, surprisingly, even though we've gone from place to place and place to rehearse. the motivation is still extremely high.
So was that originally the idea that you have professional musicians, and then, you know, is it music students, or are they just people who want to make music?
Well, the community members generally are, there's a wide variety of folks within the orchestra. There are teachers, some retired. There are doctors and lawyers and
Really?
folks who have skill. That many of them actually will tell you that they wanted to be musicians,
Mm.
but they pursued another path for financial reasons or things like that. So this is an opportunity for them to play. The students who are in the group are all students who are studying in the Department of Music.
Okay.
So they have an intention to either teach music or perform professionally.
But I hear in America, well, in America, the orchestras are all privately funded.
Yes,
Yeah, so
that is true. I mean,
sponsorships and things like that. Mm.
yes, the West Virginia Orchestra is fortunate in that the university sponsors
Okay.
the orchestra. They pay the salaries of those professional musicians that I mentioned. They, you know, there are student fees that support the orchestra in terms of, you know, purchasing music, renting music, um, securing venues when we need them, things like that. The university sponsored the tours to Carnegie Hall and Kennedy Center. So that orchestra is very fortunate in that it doesn't have to go out into the community much and seek funding.
Mm.
The professional orchestra in Ohio is very much what you described. This is an orchestra that depends upon the kindness of friends, as it were, you know, the sponsorship of patrons and such, grants, those kinds of things. So you can imagine that this year has been very challenging. When the orchestra is not in the public eye, the funds tend to dry up a bit.
Mm.
So it's
So
been
yeah,
very challenging.
this is what I wonder, that the sponsors of these orchestras in America, did they just stop sponsoring? Because do you get sponsored by the performances, or how does it work there?
I think that has happened with some orchestras to a degree. And I do think that orchestras which have not found means and ways to be creative with the programming and that kind of thing will have a real challenge in reopening when the time comes, because some of the fixed costs of the orchestra don't change. You know, we're not paying as much out to musicians' salaries and things like that. But the fixed costs don't change. We still maintain office space. We still have staff. You know, that kind of thing. So it has the orchestras have found that we must be creative. We must find ways to stay in the public eye. So, you know, chamber performances, recordings such as the one we did. We hosted watch parties. We did all those types of things to draw in. And I was very happy with our February performance. The local media outlet that sponsored, you know, they broadcast the event. It was the most watched event in the history of that media outlet.
Wow, that's
So I
amazing.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, I was very pleased with that. And it just, to me, it gives me great hope,
Mm.
because there are two schools of thought here in the States. Some folks think that when this is all over, folks are going to flock back to the concert halls, and they're going to be so hungry and desirous of you know live performance that they'll come back in droves. I kind of belong to that school of thought. I am very hopeful. The other school of thought is that people are from now on are going to be anxious and they're going to be fearful, so the audiences will not be as large, and we're going to have to continue doing these different things that we're doing now. Uh, the 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 response to that recording makes me very hopeful that I'm right, and that the audience is so willing and hopeful to be back in the concert hall, that when we perform in July, that we won't have enough seats. That's my hope. So
Yeah. I also have that idea. I almost think as if now there's such a spotlight on the arts, in the sense that everybody's aware of what's, well, we're trying to make people aware of what's happening. And what I find very interesting, is that, yes, you say that, you know, now there's many recordings and live streamings, but I do think people will be much more eager to go to see live performances, because of course it's not the same when you see it on a screen.
mhm. I
Yeah.
completely agree. Here in West Virginia, the governor mandates when we can and cannot open the concert halls and the performance venues. And about 2 weeks ago, roughly 2 weeks ago, he lifted all restrictions, and his edict, his mandate said he would lift those restrictions at midnight that night, right? And I called a friend and I said, hey, did you read this? And they said, yes. And I said, I will bet you all the money that I have in my pocket that someone has a performance at 12:01 today. And
Yeah.
it happened. Someone did have a
Really?
performance. Yeah,
Isn't
now
that
wasn't
wonderful?
it
That's
wasn't a
great.
classical music performance. It was a jazz combo.
Yeah.
But they had a public performance at a club here in West Virginia, and they managed to publicize it on Facebook and various venues and such like that. So I called my friend back and I said, I told you.
Yeah.
So,
But that's amazing. But
yeah,
Scott, now, how did you keep yourself motivated?
it is challenging. I never find myself honestly in a need for motivation to conduct. It's been my life for so long, and these Tuesday evening rehearsals that I've had with my West Virginia orchestra have really been. I found it quite different. I haven't found a need to motivate myself. I've found myself quite opposite, looking forward to those Tuesday evenings. They've
Okay.
really been an uplifting experience. And to, in the beginning, I was conflicted really with it, to see, should we be doing this?
Mm.
And the response of the musicians is what really buoyed me and kept me going through it, because they would not have had it any other way. They very much preferred it. Now, there were moments where, a musician would not be able to come. I was happy, very happy to tell you that there were none of the musicians in the orchestra who were ever tested positive for COVID. It never happened. Now,
Mm.
we did have folks who would miss a rehearsal here and there because a family member had tested positive, and they were in quarantine for a period of time. Um, but it was encouraging to me, and it kept me going to just see how inspired they were to come on Tuesday evenings. I think without it, the our musicians would have had a greater problem with the depression that you hear about, and things like that. I really do feel like it was a
Mm.
good and wholesome experience for them throughout,
Mm.
and for
Uh,
me as well.
mm. But do you think in the area where you are in West Virginia, is that's your area?
I'm
So,
based in West Virginia, yes.
yeah. So would you say, in that area art is valued?
Oh, very much so, very much so. I mean, the state is it's unique amongst the states, in my opinion. There are metropolitan centers in the state, and then there are rural areas in the state, and there's very little in between. West Virginia has a large amount of uninhabited space, to be quite honest with you. It's very mountainous and such. So in the metropolitan centers, and I live very near the capital city. It's there's a great desire to sponsor and support the arts. There are, there's a professional symphony orchestra here. There are, varieties of choral groups and while we're like any other groups in the United States that rely on patronage, sometimes we struggle a bit. There's always a great desire. Before the pandemic, there was always a great desire for people to be in the concert hall, go to the ballet. Um, the one thing we lack here that I wish we had is an opera company.
Oh,
We
okay.
we do not have an organized opera company here.
What is your ballet company called there?
It's called the Charleston Ballet. The capital city is Charleston, West Virginia, and it's called the Charleston Ballet. And they do many performances, but they do a Nutcracker in conjunction with the local professional symphony each year and things like that. So, but it's very well supported. There's another organization here called the Appalachian Children's Chorus, and that children's chorus is phenomenal, and it's so well supported. I know the director well, and I tease her sometimes about all the money that she must have just lying around in great pots. So they're very well supported.
So for instance, these orchestras that are there, they are all professional musicians, and they are all make their living from the orchestras, or do they have to have side incomes?
Yes, in the States, there's a term, I'm not sure if it is used in Europe, but there's what we call highway orchestras here. And that simply means that a lot of your musicians are not locals. They come in to town, they perform with the orchestra, and then they go back to wherever their base may be. So those musicians, many of those make up the West Virginia Symphony. That's the professional group. And they cobble together a living from playing in many orchestras. They'll play in, some of them play in Ohio for me, in my other orchestra. And they'll play in various orchestras and put together those incomes to make a living.
Mm.
So a few of them live here. I would say out of the professional orchestra here, I would say 20% perhaps are based here.
Okay.
Now my folks all live here. The furthest anyone travels is probably 30 miles.
Okay. But I mean, it's not as if there's not an orchestra. What I mean is there's not an orchestra that is solely this orchestra, and they pay the musicians, and the musicians live just from being in that orchestra.
No, not in West Virginia. Now there are some fairly close orchestras that operate that way. My orchestra in Ohio is very close to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati has large orchestras. If you go north above the state into Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh Symphony is fairly close to us, and those are the types of orchestras wherein the musicians are full-time tenured members of the orchestra who draw a salary that upon which they can live, and they have benefits, they have insurance, they have all those types of things.
Now, for children, for example, so you also mentioned that in these orchestras are, in that orchestra, there are, say, doctors and people from all different walks of life, and they wanted to be musicians, but of course they then went and did something else. Could that be because of that reason, that you cannot make a living solely out of being a musician?
Oh, I'm quite sure. Of course, I've spent a long time in my career. I really have simultaneous careers. I've been in education my entire life as well. I'm finishing now, as this year ends, I'm finishing my 34th year in teaching. And of course, what I have found is that the students who are drawn to music are top level students. These are highly intelligent students, highly motivated. They come from homes wherein they have great support. And so it's not surprising to me that many of my former students, while they have been incredible musicians, have gone on to fields where they you know, they use the power of the mind. You know,
Yeah.
there are so many doctors, so many lawyers who've gone through my ensembles over the years. So, um, you know, it's not surprising to me. I'm not convinced that it's only a financial uh, issue. I think to some degree it is, to a large degree it probably is. But we're also talking about a group of people who they're vastly intelligent people,
Mm,
superbly intelligent people. And they just have this desire, many of them, I think, just have this desire to do great things in the world. Um,
mm,
so they look to fields like medicine or law or fields where they feel like they can make a real difference in the
mm.
world. And quite frankly, orchestras like the one I have here in West Virginia, um, they give those folks an outlet to be able to continue their creative endeavor and then still do those great things they had hoped to do. So
Mm.
it's a as we say, a win-win.
Yeah. Because here you find that, I mean, people just become, I say here, but it's like they are musicians and this is what they are. This
Hmm.
is the job, and this is all that they want to do. And I wonder in America, if where would that be? Would it be because the state it doesn't fund these orchestras? Is it because you think that they're, you know, the people don't see that as so important, or the state doesn't see it as so important that they would have these orchestras? Because now when, say for instance, these students that you say they are top level students, they are top musicians, um, but they go on to do other things, if they could have been studying further in music and being having this opportunity to you know, uh, be professional musicians, you know.
I do.
um,
I think you're probably onto something. I think that has a great deal to do with it. The level of support in European orchestras. I've conducted in Europe as well. The level of support is almost unbelievable to American musicians. You know, I mean, and when we realize that our orchestra boards are out doing fundraisers all the time, we're, you know, practically begging for support from communities. You know, that has to play into minds. And I mentioned earlier that these students and these young people, they come from families that are incredible support systems. And I know, I mean, I'm sure that it's difficult for a parent to say, you have this ability and this intelligence level where you could move into this field and make incredible amounts of money, or you can be a musician and worry every year about, you know.
yeah.
So I'm sure that that is to some degree plays into it. Here, I think also the the number of orchestras who offer positions wherein a musician can actually make a living and be supported and support a family and all those types of things. The number of those orchestras is small. So consequently, the field is so competitive for those
Mm,
jobs that I think that can be a bit discouraging to young musicians as well. Even if they have great ability, it can just be
mm,
very discouraging to and you know, to know that to get one of those positions, you're going to pick up your life and you're going to do it someplace else, away from family, away from
yeah.
friends, and that kind of thing. I'm sure it can be very discouraging.
I mean, this is
So,
the, yeah, this is the sacrifice, you know, and this is what I also saw by photographing these artists, that they are come from all over the world, you know, leave their
yes.
families behind and come to study here, for example, in Vienna.
Hmm.
I have photographed a few American musicians here as well. Um, but what I was thinking uh, also was that it can start with the education system, because actually when you look at our education system around the world, it is based on the system that was designed for the industrial era, to where maths and sciences are the most important subjects. And actually, when you look at all the research that has been done in the past, well, not I say recently, I think in the past 30 years, what music, what dancing, what art, how that affects the brain and the development of the brain. That shouldn't we start talking about this and saying how important it is for children in schools to be taught art? And I'm not talking about these schools where, you know, from the age of 16 you go to a music school or something. I'm talking about entry level, you know, children 5, 6 years old, starting school, getting the basics of music, getting the opportunity to choose either to do play an instrument or, you know, dancing or visual arts. But that would change also in many ways the development of the child, and also change the way society sees art, that they don't see art as entertainment, but see art just like we see now as a valuable subject as maths and science. So now schools, for example, have to get into a very prestige school, you have to have high marks in maths and science. Whereas you could have the subject art with and have an all-round person, you know, with many skills that could benefit the workplace. And you were talking about these students that went on to become doctors, who went to study medicine. That must say something about the education in music that develops the brain.
Sure. You know, you make a very good point. Oftentimes, I think that society, if you look back through history, you see that society is rife with these knee-jerk reactions to things. And oftentimes, you know, there's a saying here in the States that if it isn't broken, don't fix it. You know, and if we look back, you know, as far back as even, you know, the great societies, the Greek and Roman societies, you find out that music was, you know, the Greeks considered music one of the 7 liberal arts and sciences that everyone must learn, you know, to become a well-rounded person. The Romans looked at music, you know, as the muses of the gods. They all looked at music as being an integral part of a well-rounded person. But along comes, you know, at least here in the States, along comes 20th century education, and you know, a group of students doesn't score as highly on a standardized test in some STEM field, and our knee-jerk reaction is to remove the arts, or at least curtail the arts in the curriculum, so that those monies can be, you know, it's so much about the money, that those monies can be applied to the STEM fields. And what we're producing, I've had this argument for years, what we're producing are non-well-rounded individuals who have, I mean, let's assume for a moment that we take that money and we put it over here, and then consequently you score better on your STEM test and you're able to get into a great school and make lots of money. What is the quality of your life without the arts and the arts influence on your life? What is the quality of it? So, you know, it's a very risky, in my opinion, roll of the dice to remove funding from the arts in favor of something else. And I'll add one thing to that. I'm one of those folks, you know, over the years, we've seen all of these, the Mozart effect and all this kind of thing. And there are a lot of educators here in the States who want to say arts belong in the curriculum because students who are in arts score better in math and science and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's dangerous too. I understand the motivation to say that, and I completely agree with it. I think students in the arts will score higher in STEM fields and that kind of thing. But I think it's dangerous to make the argument that arts should exist for the benefit of
Oh yeah,
something
I
else.
know what you mean. Yeah,
Art should exist on their own,
yeah.
on their own merit. Excuse me.
I wonder if many children miss out on, say, a good education because of the fact that they're not strong in, say, subjects like maths, and especially young children. And I feel it's almost giving children a way of expressing themselves. And if you look at younger children, how they don't have as many inhibitions as, say, a teenager. So young children just absorb. And I've actually spoken to a composer who said that he went to a school and just had a little program in 3 days' time with children who had no music background, no music education. And he did a bit of composing, very basic composing with them. And he said, you cannot believe the result. You cannot believe what these young children came up with. And that made me realize also that, can you imagine that with everything we expose them, if you know, to all forms of art, and let them then gradually develop in that, and have art alongside these other subjects, you know, like languages, like maths and science, but give it that importance. Because then we raise also a society, or where we will have a society who value that and who would see the importance of it. And we, you know, have governments that, and politicians that see the value in that. But I wonder many times if people, because that is not, they don't have the exposure to art. So certain children have this exposure because of the families that they come from, and you know, parents that see the need for them to play an instrument. But there are many children coming from families where parents don't have a clue, you know, or not the means to pay for a music lesson. And those children, you never know what their potential would have been, or how they could have benefited from this education.
You're absolutely right. I mean, over my career in education, I have seen so many students who come from, you know, broken families. They come from one income families where there's not the means to support on the level that the mother or father may want to. And what I find is that for many of those students, the musical experience that they had was really what kept that student in school, what managed to help that student matriculate through to graduation, was that desire every day to, you know, they didn't come to school for math and science. They came to school for orchestra. They came to school for band. They came to school for whatever visual art class that they were in. And many of those students, because of that experience, they developed great skill. They were able to get scholarships and went on, you know, to do wonderful things at university. And but without that experience, and each year it's discouraging. Each year in the States, we see more funding taken away from the arts and put into other fields. That's the argument that all arts people in the States make. And I know it sounds repetitive, but you were right there. I think that society has a responsibility to see to the complete education of its citizens, of its young people. And when we leave the arts out, and I keep talking about music because that's my field, but when we leave out the visual arts, when we leave out, you know, the foreign languages, someone has joined us for the conversation.
I just wanted to ask you, I would love to see you.
This is Rosie.
What is the breed?
She is a Boston Terrier.
A Boston Terrier.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is so sweet. But he's still young, is he?
She's not quite a year yet. Yes.
A she. Is it a she?
She, yes. She's not quite
What's
1
her
year
name?
old. Rosie.
Rosie.
Rosie, right? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Rosie can join. Maybe maybe Rosie
Um,
has an answer for us.
I do, over the years, I've become very discouraged at times, when, the funding for this or that is cut, and that sort of thing. And you really, when you take it even out of education and you go into the professional realm, uh, it's very difficult. You see more orchestras, more ballet companies, more opera companies. You're putting shutters on the windows, every year in the States because of the fact that while we have a very supportive base of patrons and we could not survive without them, we really need that, not just the financial support, but the acknowledgement
Mm.
of the state,
Yeah, I think
you
that
know.
is something that acknowledgement and the respect, that
Right.
to say good. So we respect people who go and study law for many years and medicine. But if I see the students here at our university, MDV, um, they study for many, many years. I mean, I spoke to a tenor the other day, and he studied 13 years. Uh,
Mhm.
all the years of studying together were 13 years. And you think, my goodness, that's a very long time for somebody to study in music, yet he doesn't have that same sort of respect as, and I'm not saying doctors, they do, and they do very valuable work and so on. But I think now when we see the value of art in also physiologically for us, how just they found that music can actually, the frequency of music can actually reach the cells of the body. Then we have to start asking, but how important is it that that music should be part of? I mean, music is used for therapies like, for example, Alzheimer's, and for well, for autism and so on. So there has to be that acknowledgement how valuable that is for us, for our
You're
health
you're
as well.
you're absolutely right. An enlightened individual such as yourself and an enlightened society, and I do feel that in many ways Europe is a bit more enlightened than we are, realizes the value,
Mm.
beyond just the topical value of the arts. Um, I had a teacher years ago who said something that stuck with me, and it had to deal with this very issue of respect for musicians in society as it relates to other fields. But he said, it's difficult for musicians to gain the respect of society because oftentimes people look at us and they say, well, that's the only field wherein when you work, you play.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so
Mm.
folks look at it, well, they're just playing music. They're just,
Mm.
and it has created a real void
Mm.
between artistic and non-artistic entities in society. And
But I think,
it's
yeah, but I think it's
not playing
also
at all, as you mentioned. Folks
exactly,
spend years and years,
yeah.
and hours each day. That's the thing that folks don't realize. They think you come to the concert hall to hear a concert, and these guys just sat down together on the stage and did this. They have no idea
Yeah.
the hours and hours of preparation that happened with each musician individually before they
Mm.
came to the rehearsal, and then the hours that went into, so.
Well, that it's the same with me. I mean, I'm not a musician, I'm not an artist, and I realized all these things just by photographing all these musicians in their windows and hearing what they're saying and hearing how long they study and talking to them about it. But
Sure.
this is now also something that I thought about. Isn't this the problem, that we go to a concert and everybody's dressed up and we see this 3 hour or 2 hour concert in this wonderful music hall, and we think that the musicians, well, they look very smart and dressed up, so they probably don't need anything, that's, or they enjoy what they're doing, so why do they have to get paid, like that you're saying that. But what we don't realize is that before before the concert. And like I spoke to an opera singer the other day who told me that took him a year to prepare for one role,
Sure.
So
Yeah.
in a way, the musicians, I get this idea, you just get on with it and you just do your thing. But maybe it's also a time now where musicians have to start talking about how the process works. What are you doing? And I'm not saying to make a drama out of it, but really to show the facts, to say, well, this, I practice 8 hours a day, or for me for you, for example, as a conductor, what does it take for you to get this orchestra together? And I wonder sometimes if that shouldn't be also something to think about, that should be more open,
Certainly. And I do think, really, I'm glad you brought that up. I do think that if there is a silver lining to this pandemic, it is that when society is able to return to whatever degree of normal that we determine is now normal, I do think that folks will be so hungry for that boost in their quality of life that they want to return to the concert hall and the to see the ballet and the opera and things like that, to the museums, and that will cause us to have a good opportunity to open that dialogue, and to say this conversation must be had. We experienced over a year, however long it will be when it's over, we experienced this amount of time experiencing a quality of life virtually devoid of the arts. Now we must have a conversation of what is necessary to do this right this time, and return the arts to where they are and put it in a place of respect that it deserves, So, and I think maybe the mindset coming out of the pandemic will be such that maybe we can have that conversation. We certainly should.
Yeah, and I think also to talk about the music and talk about what how you experience it, or what made you choose this piece of music, or what you think about the music, because I this is also something that I heard, spoke to a few musicians, and then they tell me something about their favorite composer, and tell me something about this music that inspired me it makes me so inquisitive to then go and listen to the music where I didn't know the music, or didn't know what they were talking about, because I don't have the music education. And I think that part, that really making people inquisitive and educating people in a way, who don't know about the music or don't know about the composers, in that way.
That's something I really enjoy doing in my concerts. Is I feel as though I have, and I don't mean this to come out the wrong way, but I do feel as though I have a responsibility to educate the public a bit about things that will cause them to really grasp for that music, and not just listen passively, but really be an active listener in the music. So it's a really fine line for a conductor to walk at a concert. No one comes to the concert to hear the conductor pontificate about these things, but it can really enhance the experience for a non-musician to hear that, what was Beethoven experiencing when he wrote the Seventh Symphony,
Exactly,
or what,
yeah.
what was happening in society that caused him to do this? What aspects of life in the Soviet Union caused Shostakovich to write in the manner that he did, in the Fifth Symphony or whatever? And it really gives a unique experience. So, and something else is that, every listening experience is different. Even the same concert is a different listening experience for you than it is for the person in the seat next to you, because of what you bring to the concert hall with you. What happened today? What happened to you? What happened to that individual? What are you dealing with? And I think coming out of the pandemic, when we're able to perform again, you're going to see that baggage, if you will, coming into the concert hall. And I think you're going to see it affect people and impact people far more greatly than it did in the past. You know, all of us are, you know, carrying a tremendous baggage from this. So I think this will be
Yeah.
an opportunity for us to I don't know, I don't mean to be dramatic about it, but I think it's an opportunity for us to as musicians to help heal society as artists.
Exactly. But Scott, you're not the first conductor who tells me that when talking to the audience, you don't want to sound like you're giving a lecture or something.
Right, 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 right.
Yeah. You're not the first
Yeah.
conductor to tell me that, but I do think, you know, I don't think that the audience will see it that way. I think exactly what you're saying, you know, that that making people aware what to listen to, or because they would still, you know, hear it in a different way.
Sure.
But
I think so. Mhm.
I actually have a lot of conductors on my project. I've
Oh.
photographed a lot of conductors for this
Mhm.
project because I'm very fascinated by the work that you're doing. I find conducting, I didn't know much about conducting until I started talking to conductors. And of course, that made me try and get as many as possible on the project, because I
Mhm.
find that it's very interesting for me that you are able to, for example, take the sounds, all the sounds of the orchestra, and give back one sound. That thing
Mhm.
is very interesting.
Mm.
Um,
It
and
really is. I mean, it's just, it's such a, I don't know how to describe it without sounding overly dramatic, but it's really a life affirming kind of experience for me, to be able to work with musicians and, as you said, put them together to create, you know, you're creating a sound. You're not creating the oboe and the flute and the violin. You're creating this combination of sounds that is entirely unique, to what the composer wrote and to your interpretation of what the composer wrote, and the interaction between conductor and musician. You know, I'm always attempting to be that far ahead of what is happening, so that what sound is returned to me, I can then evaluate and say, okay, did that sound match what is happening here? If it didn't match, I instantly believe it's my fault. My
mm,
gesture did not elicit the response that I wanted, so I need to alter what I'm doing. So I always try to be that far ahead so that in the moment I can make those evaluations. And it's an incredibly
well, I
the
think,
experience creates great adrenaline. I love it.
well, I think world leaders can learn a lot from conductors, really.
Oh,
You know, because I think if you take an orchestra, for example, you not only have different instruments, you also have different personalities, you have different cultures, you have different backgrounds, and basically you are one person bringing all that together. And I think orchestras, I think the world can also learn from orchestras, because orchestras also, um, you know, all the different nationalities come together, and they come together and make, you know, music together, and they are respectful of each other and respectful of their nationalities or their cultures. So I think there's a lot to learn. There's really a lot to learn from that. And also, I think the same in ballet companies, you know, looking at the dancers coming together like that. So
sure.
I really feel, you know, and society can learn a lot from the arts in that way as well.
I agree. I mean, it's a, you know, you're not just dealing on the podium. You're not just dealing with the interpretation and the notes on the page, although that's what everyone thinks. You're dealing with
Yeah,
the psychology of the orchestra, you know, and
exactly.
as of each individual. But when you put those together collectively, the psyche and the psychology of the orchestra, and what amazing things the orchestra can do, or the ballet company, the opera singer can do in a short period of time. I'll give you a quick example. Several years ago here, near my home, we had some horrific flooding, and several people lost lives, great loss of property value, and several of the schools were flooded. And so the music programs lost their instruments. They lost, it was just a terrible experience. Um, so we decided very quickly that we would put together an orchestra and a chorus and do a benefit concert for those school programs that lost all their musical equipment and such. We rehearsed one day, and then the next day we publicized it, but the next day we met at a public park on the river, and we did a concert. And in less than an hour's time, we raised nearly $20,000 to replace those
Wow.
instruments.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Now see what the power of that.
Mhm.
But
Yes,
Scott,
indeed.
people have their bucket lists, and they want to, I don't know, do skydiving and
Mhm.
bungee jumping and all that. Now, my bucket list used to be, I wished I could have stood in front of a platoon of soldiers
Mhm.
and shout attention, and everybody in like one man comes to attention and march, and then they all march, because I have 3 children and they never did that for me. I always had to ask 3 times or 4 times before they reacted. So I always said I would love to know what it feels like to just stand in front of a group of people and say one thing and they react. But now
Right.
in the meantime, I've changed my bucket list. I want to be a conductor just for 1 second.
Really?
Because I just want to let the baton down, and then bam, there comes a sound.
I warn you, if you do it for 1 second, you will do it for the rest of your life. It's very addictive. It is.
Yeah, no,
Yes, indeed.
but it's wonderful that I mean, I think it's a wonderful. I understand that also from conductors that I've spoken to, it's much more than just knowing the music. You have to have a people's knowledge, and of course many other things that you have to understand to be able to deal with an orchestra.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The knowledge of the music is only the first step. There's so much more involved, and the interaction of nonverbal communication between conductor and musician is a language. It really is a language that musicians speak. Actually, the school of thought that I studied in conducting, I studied in St. Petersburg in Russia,
Mm.
and that language is very much about natural movement. So I dare say that even if you came and sat in my orchestra, you would understand my gesture, because it's based upon things that we all do every day, so that the mind subconsciously understands, oh, he wants this because this is what I do when I do such and such.
Oh, I see.
So
Mm.
even you would understand it. And I would say this, let me add, don't give up on this dream of being a conductor, because we have, actually here in the States, it ties into what we were saying before. We have to raise money all the time, all the time.
Mm.
And one of the things that we do is that we have these contests. It's called Maestro for a Moment.
Oh,
Uh,
is it? Oh,
yes.
wow.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like an auction sort of. People donate money. Whoever donates the most money gets to
Yeah.
conduct the orchestra.
Oh, okay.
So, so
Yeah.
I invite you to a concert, and so maybe you can be
So I
maestro
can,
for a moment.
for a moment. Oh, that was, oh, that was, well, that then my bucket list isn't so unreasonable. Yeah. But listen, Scott, what on the lighter note now, also, did you do anything interesting over lockdown? Did you start baking or gardening or something that you never have time to do?
I did not. I wish I could give you a great and interesting answer on that. At the time when lockdown began, in addition to my musical work, I also worked for a long period of time in administration at the university. And I was serving as the provost and vice president for academic affairs. So I was one of those individuals who was considered essential. And I went to work every day. I did not miss one day of
Really?
work. Yeah. So that was in addition to my musical things. Since that time, I made the conscious decision to just step away and concentrate on the musical part of what I'm doing. So I'm no longer doing that. But during the height of it, I was just going to work trying to keep the university running.
Mm.
So I didn't do that. Uh, our class is in next week for the semester, and we'll have our summer break. And I was talking to my wife the other day. I said, you know, this is the first time in 34 years I've really had a summer with nothing to do.
Really?
And
Yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned gardening, because she said, well, why don't you plant a garden, or why don't you do something like
Oh.
that? So to be honest, I'm a little apprehensive about what I'm going to do with my time.
Mm.
Maybe I'll spend time with Rosie. Who knows?
Rosie, yeah. Go for long walks with Rosie. That would be great. Yeah.
Right.
But now just one more question. What is your wish for when this is all over?
Oh my goodness. My wish for when this is all over, I guess ties into what we had said before, that those that I'm right in my assumption that folks will want to flock back to the concert halls, that there will be plentiful opportunities for folks to make, and not just make music, but appreciate music as well, and that society will see this these days, this arts drought that we've really had through this thing, as an opportunity to open that conversation that we had talked about, and give the arts it's, you know, give it its rightful place and its respect in society, so that we don't ever have to look back and say, what, you know, this is what we took for granted.
Mm. Yeah, and I do agree with you also that I think that there will be, I think, an interest in art, in watching art and experiencing art live.
Hmm.
Um, so
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think projects like yours will help that. I really do. I think
Well,
this is a
I
wonderful
hope.
project.
Thank you very much. I hope so. You know, I think if everybody can just do, I just have a camera and you know, if everybody just uses what they have or talk about it, and I think talking about education and talking about these things, the more people talk about it, I think the more we can uh, get somewhere, you know. And if I
Mm.
think, if you look at the history of the Wright brothers, for example, you know, they were, they had a printing shop, and then they started making bicycles,
Mm.
um, and they were the first people to fly an airplane or to build the airplane. And you think, um, from bicycles to there, so I think anything is possible. Now
Sure.
we're flying all over the world now, and and this was not so long ago where they had this dream of doing that. So I think if we talk about the education, there will be people hearing, and there will be people giving initiatives or doing initiatives too, so that we can, and then maybe in a few generations there will be a education system that, you know, would have art as a main subject in the schools. I believe
Absolutely. I
that.
mean, my hope. And you know, you said something just a minute ago that struck me. You said, I just have a camera, or I have just a camera. But you know, it's projects like these. I mean, Toscanini changed the world with a little stick of wood, you know, and Rembrandt with only a paintbrush. You know, who knows? With just your
Yeah,
camera, you may change the world.
just my little camera. Yeah. Scott, this was so lovely to talk to you and Rosie. And Rosie is very comfy there on your lap. I
Oh,
think
she is.
Rosie,
This is her favorite place. She's most happy, I think,
really,
when she's right
she's in
here.
love with you, I think. Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's a returned feeling. She's a good
Oh,
pal.
so sweet. Well, I hope you have a lovely walks with Rosie when you have your time off. Um, and maybe a few minutes in the garden, just for your wife's sake.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for
And
including
it
me in
was
this.
so lovely to talk to you, really, very insightful.
Likewise.
And whenever you are in Vienna or visit in Vienna, please let me know. And I would so love to meet you in person.
That would be wonderful. I would enjoy that very much. And let's try to keep in touch.
Yes, definitely. Anything interesting happening, please let me know.
I will. I will.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. Have
All right.
a lovely afternoon.
Thank you. And you as well.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.